The massive council chamber stretched across the space station like a small city. Thousands of alien beings filled the seats, their voices creating a strange symphony of clicks, hums, and whistles. Ambassador Jinho stood alone at the center podium, his hands clasped behind his back. His face showed nothing, though his heart was heavy. The council leader, a tall creature covered in shimmering blue scales, raised one clawed hand. The room fell silent. His voice boomed through the translation devices everyone wore. The species called humanity has broken our laws. They built weapons during peacetime. Big weapons. Weapons that can destroy whole planets. This cannot be allowed. The punishment is expulsion from the Galactic Union. Humans must leave all Union space within 10 days. They cannot trade with us for 50 years. Around the chamber, aliens nodded and made sounds of agreement. Some were laughing. The insect-like Clith clicked their mandibles in amusement. The floating gas beings called Nurax pulsed with satisfied colors. The proud Vrathan whispered to each other, their scales flashing with pleasure. Mayang, standing beside Jinho, felt tears on her cheeks. She was young, only 25, and this was her first major assignment as a diplomatic aide. She had believed in the Union. She had believed humans and aliens could work together as equals. Ambassador, she whispered, her voice shaking. This is wrong. We helped build half the stations in this sector. Our doctors saved billions of their people. Our engineers designed their transport systems. How can they just throw us out? Jinho put a gentle hand on her shoulder. Quiet now, he said softly. Let them have their moment. The council leader looked down at Jinho with obvious satisfaction. Do you accept this judgment, human? We accept, Jinho said clearly. Humanity will leave Union space as ordered. We will be gone within 10 days. And, these weapons you built in secret? Another council member asked. These planet killers? They will leave with us, Jinho replied. According to Article 12 of your own expulsion laws, we can take our property when we go. A Clith delegate made a chittering sound that the translator rendered as laughter. Let the primitives keep their toys. What harm can they do out in the darkness alone? More laughter rippled through the chamber. The Vrathan counselors exchanged knowing looks. The Nurax shifted colors and patterns that meant amusement. Jinho gathered his papers slowly. He took his time, making sure each document was properly aligned. Mayang wiped her eyes and tried to stand tall beside him. Together, they walked toward the exit. It was a long walk. The chamber was enormous, and their footsteps echoed on the polished floor. As they passed row after row of alien delegates, Mayang heard the whispers and saw the smirks. Some aliens didn't even bother to hide their pleasure at seeing the humans humiliated. Good riddance to the chaos bringers, someone said. Finally, we can have order again, said another. Unpredictable. Dangerous. Better off without them. Mayang's fists clenched, but Jinho's steady pace never changed. His face remained calm, almost serene. When they finally reached the exit and the doors closed behind them, Mayang broke down completely. How can you be so calm? She demanded. They just destroyed everything we worked for. 20 years of partnership, gone. Because they're afraid of us. Because we think differently than they do. Jinho led her to a bench in the corridor outside. The walls here were transparent, showing the vast darkness of space beyond. Hundreds of human ships were visible in the distance, already gathering for the exodus. Mayang, Jinho said quietly, do you know what those weapons really are? The ones they're so afraid of? She shook her head, still crying. They're not weapons at all. They're terraforming devices. They can take a dead rock of a planet and make it livable in 6 months. We built them to create new homes for everyone in the Union. We were going to announce them next month as a gift. Mayang stared at him. But, then, why didn't you tell them? Why didn't you explain? Jinho smiled sadly. We tried. 3 times over the past year, we requested permission to present our terraforming project. 3 times, we were told to wait. They didn't want to hear about human innovations. We make them uncomfortable. We solve problems in ways they don't understand. We ask questions they think are stupid. We combine ideas that they think should stay separate. So they saw the energy readings from our tests and assumed the worst, Mayang said, understanding dawning. Exactly. And, when we tried to explain, they didn't believe us. In their minds, humans are primitive. Chaotic. Too young to have anything valuable to offer. So obviously, if we're building something powerful, it must be a weapon. Mayang looked out at the gathering fleet. What happens now? Now. Jinho stood up, straightening his jacket. Now we leave. We take our engineers, our doctors, our teachers, our artists. We take our ideas and our innovations. We take everything we've built into their systems over the past 20 years. But, they have their own engineers. Their own technicians. Jinho's smile grew wider. Do they? Or do they have people who learn to push buttons in the right order? People who memorize procedures without understanding principles. People who never asked why things work, only how to operate them. The first seeds of understanding began to grow in Mayang's mind. You're saying. I'm saying, Jinho interrupted gently, that in about 3 days, when our people are gone and our ships have left, the Galactic Union is going to discover something interesting. They're going to learn the difference between running a system and understanding it. He pulled up a data pad and showed her a file marked classified. Every human working in Union space has the same orders. We leave everything exactly as it is. We don't sabotage anything. We don't break anything. We simply stop maintaining it. Stop fixing the little problems. Stop making the creative adjustments that keep complex systems running smoothly. Mayang's eyes went wide as she scrolled through the file. It contained estimates, projections, timelines. Oh my God. The station's life support depends on a recycling system that needs constant adjustment. The hyperlane beacons require weekly recalibration using mathematics that only humans understand. The medical synthesizers use compounds that we developed and only we know how to produce. Now you understand, Jinho said. The council thinks they're getting rid of a dangerous, primitive species. What they're actually doing is cutting out the heart of their civilization. And, when they realize... Jinho looked out at the stars. Then, we'll see if they're capable of learning humility. Come on. We have a lot of work to do before we leave. We need to make sure our people get home safely. As they walked toward the docking bay, neither of them looked back at the council chamber. Behind them, the aliens were still celebrating their victory, completely unaware that everything was about to change. The council had smirked as the humans left. They had no idea what was coming. Captain Daehoon watched the screens on his ship's bridge with tired eyes. The UES Indomitable was one of 300 colony ships leaving Union space today. On the view screen, he could see dozens of other human vessels, all loaded with families, equipment, and 20 years of memories. Sir, we're receiving a transmission from Clith Border Patrol, said Commander Hyojin. She was his second-in-command, and they had served together for 12 years. They're demanding we stop for inspection. Daehoon rubbed his face. They had been traveling for 6 hours already. The entire fleet was exhausted. We already sent them our cargo manifests. 3 times. What more do they want? Hyojin's jaw tightened. I think they want to remind us who's in charge one last time. 6 massive Clith warships appeared on the screen, blocking their path. Each one was enormous, bristling with weapons. The Clith were insect-like beings who loved showing their military power. Their ships were designed to intimidate, all sharp angles and dark metal. "Sir, their weapons are active," reported the tactical officer. "That's a violation of safe passage laws. Who are we going to complain to?" Daehoon said bitterly. "We're not part of the Union anymore. We have no rights here." He took a deep breath. "Send a message to all ships in the convoy. We submit to inspection. Full cooperation. No arguments, no resistance." The inspection was humiliating. Clith soldiers in environmental suits swarmed through the Indomitable and every other ship. They moved through corridors, opened cargo containers, and searched personal belongings. They were looking for contraband, they said. Anything valuable that humans might be stealing from Union space. Daehoon stood in his own cargo bay and watched as a Clith soldier confiscated a small wooden box from a crew member named Yunji. She was crying silently. "What's in the box?" Daehoon asked quietly. "My daughter's baby teeth," Yunji whispered. "I kept them in this box. It's made from oak wood from Earth. The soldier says the wood contains rare minerals and it's Union property." "It's a box of baby teeth," Daehoon said to the Clith soldier. The alien's compound eyes glittered with something that looked like pleasure. "Organic material containing trace elements native to Union space. Contraband." He took the box and moved on. Yunji broke down completely. Other crew members gathered around her, but there was nothing anyone could say. This was happening all over the fleet. Wedding rings confiscated because they contained metals mined in Union space. Children's toys taken because they were made from materials that originally came from Union worlds. Even clothing was being seized. 8 hours later, the Clith captain finally appeared on Daehoon's view screen. The alien was clearly enjoying himself. "You are cleared to proceed, human. Enjoy your exile in the darkness." The transmission cut off. Slowly, the Clith warships moved aside, leaving a narrow corridor for the human fleet to pass through. As the Indomitable crossed into neutral space, the bridge crew let out a collective breath. They were finally free of Union territory. Finally, safe from the casual cruelty of beings who saw them as inferior. Hyojin approached Daehoon's command chair. Her voice was low, meant only for him. "Sir, the crew is asking questions. They want to know if it was worth it. Everything we lost. Everything we're leaving behind." Daehoon was quiet for a moment. Then, he pulled up a file on his personal terminal. It was heavily encrypted, invisible to any external sensors. The file was labeled Project Aegis. "Commander, do you know the old human saying about revenge?" he asked. "Revenge is a dish best served cold," Hyojin replied. "We're about to serve it frozen." Daehoon opened the file. Inside was a detailed analysis of every system humans had helped build in Union space. Power grids. Medical facilities. Transportation networks. Communication systems. Food production. Water purification. Everything. And, beside each system was a timeline. How long it would run without human maintenance. How long before small problems became big problems. How long before the Galactic Union realized what they had lost. 7 days, Hyojin read from the screen. That's how long Gateway Station 7 will last before major systems start failing. That's optimistic, Daehoon said. I give it 5. Behind them, as the last human ship crossed into neutral space, something happened. Gateway Station 7, the massive hub where the Council had expelled humanity just 10 days ago, experienced its first power fluctuation. It was small. Barely noticeable. The aliens on board didn't even realize it had happened. But, it was the beginning. In the engineering section of Gateway 7, a Vrathan technician named Thorkus stared at a control panel in confusion. A warning light was blinking. He checked his manual, the one written by human engineers before they left. The manual said to adjust the power flow compensators and reset the plasma regulators. Thorkus did exactly what the manual said. The warning light went off. Problem solved. Except it wasn't solved. The manual was written for humans, who understood why those adjustments worked. Thorkus had just followed instructions without understanding the underlying principle. And, because he didn't understand, he didn't notice that the adjustment he made would cause a different problem in another system 12 hours later. This was happening all over Union space. Aliens were following procedures without understanding them. They were pushing buttons in the right order but didn't know why that order mattered. They were maintaining systems the way you might maintain a car when you don't know how engines work. It would be fine for a while. Maybe days. Maybe weeks. But, eventually, something unusual would happen. Something not covered in the manual. And, when that happened, the aliens would need to actually understand the system to fix it. But, the humans who understood were gone. Daehoon watched his crew as they guided the Indomitable through neutral space. They looked defeated. They looked like people who had lost everything. And, maybe they had. But, they were also heading toward a new beginning. 3 new worlds that they would build from scratch. Worlds where they could be themselves without apology. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission," reported the communications officer. "It's from Ambassador Jinho." Jinho's face appeared on the screen. He looked tired but satisfied. "Attention all fleet vessels. We have successfully evacuated all human personnel from Union space. 20 billion people, transported safely. 0 casualties. I want to thank every captain, every crew member, every family for their patience and courage during this difficult time." He paused, and a small smile crossed his face. "I also want you to know that every human who worked in Union space followed their final orders perfectly. We left everything exactly as it was. We didn't break anything. We didn't sabotage anything. We simply stopped being there." Another pause. The smile grew wider. "I estimate the Union has about 72 hours before they start to understand what they've lost. When they do, remember this moment. Remember how they treated us. Remember Yunji's wooden box and every other casual cruelty. Because when they come asking for help, and they will, we negotiate from a position of strength." The transmission ended. Around the bridge, crew members looked at each other with new understanding. They weren't defeated refugees. They were free people who had just taught the galaxy a lesson it would never forget. Hyojin stood beside Daehoon's chair. "What do you think will happen when they realize?" "Panic, probably," Daehoon said. "Then, anger. Then, denial. Then, desperation. And, then, if we're lucky, humility. And, if we're not lucky." Daehoon looked at the stars ahead. 3 new worlds waited there. Worlds where humans could build something new. Something better. Then, we thrive without them and prove we never needed the Union in the first place. The fleet continued on its journey, leaving Union space behind. And, behind them, slowly but surely, the most powerful civilization in the galaxy was beginning to crumble. Trade Minister Velcros floated in his office chamber, his gaseous form swirling with colors that indicated extreme stress. The Nurax communicated through color changes, and, right now Velcros was flashing red and black in patterns that meant disaster. "How many systems?" he demanded of his aide. The aide, a younger Nurax named Felkes, pulsed with nervous yellow tones. 73% of all Union infrastructure is experiencing critical failures, Minister. The humans didn't just build our systems. They integrated themselves into every level of operation. We didn't realize how much we depended on them. Velcros accessed the damage reports flowing in from across the Union. The list was terrifying. Hyperlane navigation beacons were going offline. Ships were getting lost in space. Planetary defense grids were malfunctioning. Some worlds were now completely unprotected. Medical facilities couldn't synthesize 40% of essential medicines. People were dying from illnesses that should have been easily cured. Food production on 17 colony worlds had completely stopped. 17 worlds. Billions of people. They had maybe 3 months of reserves before starvation began. "This is impossible," Velcros said, his colors flashing with disbelief. "We have our own engineers. Our own technicians. Our own scientists. How can we be helpless without the humans?" Felkes shifted to a darker blue, the color of uncomfortable truth. "Our people relied on human-designed systems they never fully understood, Minister. The humans didn't sabotage anything. They didn't break anything. They simply left. And, when they left, they took their knowledge with them." On the Vrathan homeworld, Chief Scientist Thrakos was experiencing her own crisis. The quantum computer arrays that powered all of Vrathan civilization's research had been offline for 6 hours. 6 hours. In 6 hours, they should have processed millions of calculations, analyzed thousands of research projects, coordinated hundreds of experiments across dozens of worlds. Instead, the screens were dark. Thrakos stood before the silent machines with her best technicians. All of them were staring helplessly at equipment they used every day but never truly understood. "We followed the documentation exactly," insisted Morketh, one of her senior staff. His scales were flushed with embarrassment. "The human manuals are very detailed. Step 1, Step 2, Step 3. We did everything right. Then, why isn't it working?" Thrakos demanded. Morketh pulled up the manual on a datapad. "Here. This section. It says to perform intuitive debugging. But, that's not a procedure. That's not a logical step. What does intuitive even mean?" Thrakos took the datapad and read further. The manual was full of phrases like, creative problem solving, think outside the box, try different approaches, use your judgment. These weren't instructions. These weren't logical procedures that a computer could follow. These were human things. The Vrathan had spent 1,000 years developing perfect logical systems. Everything had a procedure. Everything had steps. You followed the steps, and you got results. That was how civilization worked. That was how science worked. Except the humans didn't work that way. They looked at problems from strange angles. They combined ideas that shouldn't go together. They broke rules and made up new ones. They asked, what if, instead of, what is? And, somehow, their chaos worked. "We expelled them for being too innovative," Thrakos said quietly. "We said they were too unpredictable. Too dangerous. Too likely to create problems with their rapid advancement and their refusal to follow established protocols." "Yes, Chief Scientist," Morketh agreed. "We expelled them for not being like us. And, now we learn," Thrakos continued, her voice hollow, "that their chaos was holding our order together. Our perfect logical systems only worked because humans were constantly making illogical adjustments. Our civilization was stable because they were willing to be unstable." The irony was crushing. On the Clith homeworlds, the situation was even worse. The Clith were a hive species that valued efficiency above all. Their agricultural systems were marvels of precision, designed to feed 70 billion citizens with no waste. But, those systems had been designed in partnership with human agronomists. Humans who understood the complex relationship between alien soil chemistry and Earth-derived crop modifications. Humans who could make tiny adjustments based on weather patterns, seasonal variations, and 1,000 other factors. Without those humans, the system still ran. But they ran according to fixed parameters. When the weather changed unexpectedly, no one adjusted the irrigation. When soil conditions shifted, no one modified the nutrient mix. When pests developed resistance to standard deterrents, no one created new solutions. 3 months after the humans left, crop yields dropped by 80%. The Clith were facing starvation on a scale their species had never experienced. Emergency council sessions were happening every day now. The massive chamber that had echoed with laughter at humanity's expense was now filled with desperate voices and angry accusations. "This is extortion," screeched a Clith delegate. "The humans deliberately made us dependent on them. They planned this." "Investigation shows otherwise," Velcros replied, his gaseous form pulsing with weary colors. "Records indicate that humans offered to train our people in their techniques multiple times over the past 20 years. We refused every time. We believed our own methods were superior. We saw no need to learn from a species we considered primitive." A Nurax counselor swirled with angry red tones. "They should have forced us to learn. They should have insisted." "Why?" asked a small voice from the back of the chamber. It was a Vraxton delegate, one of the smaller species rarely heard in council debates. "Why should they have forced us? We were the ones who were arrogant. We were the ones who assumed we knew better. We treated them like servants, not partners. This disaster is our fault, not theirs." The chamber fell silent. No one wanted to admit it, but everyone knew it was true. The council leader, the same Vrathan who had smirked while expelling humanity, looked older now. His scales had lost their luster. His voice was tired. "We summon them back. We issue a formal pardon. We restore their union membership with full privileges. We have no choice." "And, if they refuse?" someone asked. "Then, we beg," the council leader said simply. On New Sol, one of humanity's 3 new colony worlds, Ambassador Jinho sat in his office and watched the messages pile up. Every day brought dozens of new communications from the Union. Some were marked urgent. Some were marked critical. Some were marked priority alpha, the highest level of importance. He ignored them all. Mayang entered his office carrying yet another batch. "Sir, these are from the council leader himself. He's offering a full apology. Complete restoration of membership. Reparations for all seized property. Even a permanent seat on the High Council." Jinho didn't even look at the messages. "What else is happening out there?" Mayang consulted her datapad. "The Clith are rationing food. The Nurax have lost 6% of their population to containment field failures. The Vrathan have made 0 scientific advances in 4 months. Gateway Station 7 is running on emergency power. 3 colony worlds have been evacuated because life support failed." "Good," Jinho said quietly. Mayang looked shocked. "Sir, people are dying." "Yes," Jinho agreed. "And, that's terrible. But, do you know what would be worse? Going back now and teaching them nothing. Saving them before they truly understand what they did wrong. If we return too soon, they'll be grateful for a few months, then, slowly convince themselves that we weren't that important after all. They'll start seeing us as useful primitives again. And, in 20 years, we'll be right back where we started." He stood up and walked to the window. Outside, New Sol was growing. Humans were building homes, farms, schools. They were creating something new. Something that was entirely theirs. "We let them suffer a little longer," Jinho said. "Not to be cruel. But, to teach them something they should have learned a long time ago. Different doesn't mean inferior. Chaos doesn't mean useless. And you should never, ever take your friends for granted. Myon understood. How long do we wait? Until they're ready to listen. Really listen. Not just to hear what they want to hear, but to actually change. In the dark of space, the Galactic Union was learning a lesson it would never forget. 6 months had passed since humanity's expulsion, and the Galactic Union was dying. The collapse was happening everywhere at once, in ways both dramatic and subtle. On some worlds, it was obvious and immediate. Power grids failed, plunging cities into darkness. Life support systems shut down, forcing evacuations. Transportation networks stopped working, stranding millions of beings far from home. On other worlds, the decay was slower but just as deadly. Research facilities produced no new discoveries. Medical centers ran out of specialized medicines. Communication systems degraded little by little until worlds could barely talk to each other. The Clith homeworlds were starving. Their precise, efficient agricultural systems had become death traps. Without human agronomists to make constant tiny adjustments, the systems followed their programmed parameters exactly, even when those parameters were wrong for current conditions. When unexpected frost hit the northern continent, the irrigation systems kept running at summer levels. Crops drowned. When a new strain of fungal infection appeared in the southern fields, the automated response systems deployed the wrong treatment. The infection spread. When soil conditions changed due to seasonal variations, no one adjusted the nutrient delivery. Plants withered and died. 70 billion Clith were facing starvation. Their government was rationing food at levels not seen in 1,000 years. Worker drones were growing weak. Hive queens were beginning to cull their own populations to save resources. The Nurax were facing something worse than starvation. They were facing extinction. The Nurax existed as gaseous consciousness, their thoughts and memories held together by sophisticated energy fields. Those fields were generated by fusion reactors of incredible complexity, reactors that had been designed by human physicists 200 years ago when the Nurax first joined the Union. For 2 centuries, humans had maintained those reactors. They had improved them, upgraded them, and, most importantly, made constant adjustments to keep them running. The Nurax had never bothered to truly understand the technology. Why would they? The humans handled it. Now the reactors were failing. Not all at once, but one by one. And, when a reactor failed, every Nurax being sustained by that reactor simply stopped existing. Their consciousness dissipated into space. Billions of thoughts, memories, and experiences, gone in an instant. 6% of the Nurax population had already been lost. If the trend continued, the entire species would be extinct within 2 years. The proud Vrathan, with their 1,000-year scientific tradition and their absolute confidence in logic and order, were facing a different kind of death. Not physical extinction, but the death of progress. For 4 months, Vrathan research facilities had produced exactly 0 new discoveries. 0. In 4 months, they hadn't invented a single new technology, solved a single new problem, or answered a single new question. Their quantum computer arrays sat dark and silent. Their laboratories produced nothing but failed experiments. Chief Scientist Draco spent her days staring at equipment she couldn't make work and reading human research notes she couldn't fully understand. The notes were full of phrases like, "I had a hunch," and "I tried something crazy," and "this shouldn't work but it does." These weren't scientific methods. These were guesses and accidents and random attempts. But, somehow, the human random attempts had produced more breakthroughs than 1,000 years of careful Vrathan logic. The revelation was humbling beyond words. Emergency council sessions had become permanent. The council chamber was now in constant operation, with delegates rotating in shifts. Everyone had the same question and no one had an answer. How do we fix this? "We need the humans back," said the Nurax representative, his gaseous form pulsing with desperate colors. "My people are dying. Every day, more of us simply cease to exist. We don't have time for pride or politics. We need help now." "Agreed," said the Clith delegate. Her mandibles clicked with anxiety. "Our food reserves will last another 2 months. After that, we begin mass starvation. We must have human assistance immediately." The council leader, the Vrathan who had expelled humanity with such confidence, looked around the chamber. His scales were dull and gray. He had aged 10 years in 6 months. "We have sent 87 requests to the human government on New Sol," he said quietly. 87 formal apologies, offers of restoration, promises of reparations. They have ignored every single one. "Then, we send ambassadors," suggested a delegate from the small Vraxton species. "We go to them in person. We show them the destruction. We explain that beings are dying. And, if they still refuse," asked another. The chamber fell silent. No one wanted to consider that possibility. The idea that the primitive, chaotic humans might simply let the Galactic Union collapse was too terrible to contemplate. But, it was also the truth they deserved. They had expelled humanity with laughter and smirks. They had treated their human partners like servants and thieves. They had assumed their own superiority was so obvious that the loss of one small species wouldn't matter. They had been catastrophically wrong. "I will go myself," the council leader finally said. "I will take a delegation to New Sol. I will apologize in person. I will beg if necessary." Admiral Taijun of the Human Defense Fleet received the message in his office on New Sol. The council leader himself was requesting permission to visit. To negotiate. To discuss matters of urgent mutual concern. Taijun called an emergency meeting of the new Human Council. Around the conference table sat Jinho, who was now Director of Foreign Affairs, Sun Wu, the Minister of Defense, Boyang, the Chief of Technology and Industry, and Hannah, the Minister of Colonial Development. "They're offering us everything," Taijun said, displaying the message on the central screen. "Full membership restoration. Reparations for all seized assets, including personal items taken during the Exodus. A permanent seat on the High Council with veto power. Priority access to all Union resources. Formal acknowledgement that we were wrongly accused." "What do they want in return?" asked Sun Wu, though everyone already knew. "Technical support. Training programs. Shared research initiatives. Infrastructure maintenance." Taijun paused. "They want us to save them." Boyang, who had watched Clith soldiers confiscate her life's work during the Exodus, spoke softly. "Do you remember what they called us? Primitive. Chaotic. Too dangerous to remain in civilized space. They laughed when we left." "I remember," said Hannah. "I remember families crying because their children's toys were taken. I remember old people losing heirlooms that had been in their families for generations. I remember the smirks." Jinho listened to them all, then spoke. "Everything you're saying is true. They were cruel. They were arrogant. They deserve to suffer for what they did to us." "But," prompted Sun Wu. "But," Jinho continued, "we're better than they are. That's the whole point. We don't let billions of innocent beings die because their leaders were stupid and mean. We don't punish children for the sins of their governments. We don't become the monsters they thought we were." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the growing colony. "We accept their invitation. We send a delegation. But, we do it on our terms. We teach them what they should have learned a long time ago. And, we make sure they never forget this lesson." The vote was unanimous. 3 days later, a message went out to the Galactic Union. It was short and simple. Humanity accepts your request for negotiations. A delegation will arrive at Gateway Station 7 in 1 week. Prepare to discuss not just restoration of membership, but reformation of the Union itself. The old ways are over. If you want our help, you will earn it. On Gateway Station 7, running on emergency power and barely functional systems, the message was received with tears of relief. The humans were coming back. They would be saved. But some beings, the wiser ones, understood that salvation would come with a price. The humans weren't coming back as grateful subjects or useful servants. They were coming back as equals who demanded respect. The galaxy was about to change forever. The human delegation's arrival at Gateway Station 7 was nothing like their departure 6 months ago. This time, they weren't defendants being expelled in shame. This time, they were saviors, and everyone knew it. Ambassador Jinho led a team of 50 specialists through the station's corridors. Behind him walked engineers, doctors, agricultural experts, computer scientists, and specialists in a dozen other fields. They moved in silence, their faces calm and professional. The corridors they passed through showed the decay of 6 months without human maintenance. Lights flickered. Walls showed signs of damage from small fires that hadn't been properly repaired. The air smelled stale because the recycling systems weren't operating at full efficiency. Delegates from every member species lined the route to the council chamber. They watched the humans pass with expressions that ranged from relief to shame. Some reached out as if wanting to touch them, to confirm they were real. No one spoke. No one dared. The council leader stood at the entrance to the chamber, waiting. The proud Vrathan who had smirked while expelling humanity now looked broken. His scales were gray and dull. His posture showed defeat. Ambassador Jinho, he began, his voice trembling slightly. On behalf of the Galactic Union, I extend our deepest, save it, Jinho interrupted, his voice cold but not cruel. We're not here for apologies. We're here to discuss terms. The chamber fell absolutely silent. Beings who had lived for centuries and made decisions over decades had never heard such directness in this formal space. Several delegates stepped back, shocked. Jinho walked to the center of the chamber and activated a holographic display. Here's what humanity offers. Complete technical support for all critical systems. Training programs for all member species who want to learn. Shared research initiatives. Resumption of infrastructure maintenance. Medical assistance. Agricultural support. Everything you need to rebuild. Relief washed visibly through the assembled aliens. Some began to make sounds of gratitude. But Jinho wasn't finished. Here's what humanity requires in return. The hologram shifted, showing a new document. It was called the Human Compact. First, Jinho said clearly, the Galactic Union formally acknowledges that humanity's innovation and creativity are not flaws to be controlled but strengths to be respected. All species develop differently. All have value. Different approaches to problems are good, not dangerous. He paused, letting that sink in. Several delegates nodded slowly. The Vrathan Council leader closed his eyes. Second. The weapons you expelled us for creating? They're not weapons. They're terraforming devices. They can transform hostile, dead worlds into livable planets in 6 months instead of 600 years. We built them to expand living space for all Union species. Your paranoia saw only danger where we had created hope. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Some delegates pulled up their own records, confirming what Jinho said. The data was there. The humans had never built weapons. They had built tools of creation, not destruction. Third. Humanity receives full sovereignty over our technology. We will share. We will teach. We will collaborate. But, you will never again assume you can simply take what we create and throw us away when you find us inconvenient. We are partners, not servants. Jinho's voice grew stronger, more forceful. Fourth. The Galactic Council is reformed. No single species can be expelled without unanimous consent from all members. And, all decisions must consider how they affect every member race, not just the powerful ones. The small species have voices too. Several smaller species delegates made sounds of approval. They had been silent witnesses to humanity's expulsion, unable to speak against the larger powers. Fifth and final. You will never again mistake kindness for weakness. Jinho looked directly at the council leader. We helped you because we believed in cooperation. Because we thought different species could work together and create something better than any could achieve alone. You saw our eagerness to help and assumed it meant we were weak. Primitive. Desperate for your approval. He gestured at the damaged station around them. Now you know the truth. We weren't weak. We were strong enough to be generous. We weren't primitive. We were advanced enough to see value in sharing. We weren't desperate for you. You were completely dependent on us. The silence in the chamber was total. Some beings couldn't meet Jinho's eyes. Others stared at him with new understanding and, perhaps, new respect. The council leader finally spoke. His voice was barely a whisper. And, if we refuse these terms? Sun Wu, standing beside Jinho, smiled for the first time since entering the chamber. Then, we leave. Again. And, this time, we take our training manuals with us. We delete our documentation. We erase our research notes. You'll be left with equipment you can't use and problems you can't solve. That's blackmail, someone said weakly. No, Jinho corrected. Blackmail is forcing you to do something wrong by threatening harm. We're offering you help in exchange for respect. That's called a fair deal. The vote was called. It was unanimous. Every species, even the proud Vrathan and the militant Clith, accepted the human compact. 3 months later, the transformation was visible everywhere. On the Clith agricultural worlds, human agronomists worked side by side with Clith farmers. But, they weren't just fixing problems. They were teaching. Explaining. Showing the Clith not just what to do, but why it worked. A human named Saman stood in a vast field with a young Clith worker named Tixkla. See how the soil is darker here? Saman asked, pointing at the ground. That means more organic matter. Which means you need less fertilizer, not more. The manual says to apply standard amounts, but the manual can't account for every variation. You have to look. You have to think. You have to adjust. Tixkla's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. But, that's not efficient. If every worker has to think and adjust, it takes more time. Does it? Saman asked. Look at your yields from when you followed the manual exactly. Now look at the fields where we've been making adjustments. Which is producing more food? Tixkla checked her datapad. The adjusted fields were producing 30% more. I see, she said slowly. Efficiency isn't just about following rules quickly. It's about getting the best results. Now you're learning, Saman said with a smile. On the Nurax homeworld, human physicists were working around the clock to stabilize the failing containment reactors. But, again, they weren't just fixing. They were teaching. Dr. Mincio stood before a holographic display with a group of Nurax engineers. Their gaseous forms swirled with colors indicating intense concentration. The problem, Mincio explained, is that you're treating these reactors like they're static machines. But, they're dynamic systems. They interact with each other. They respond to environmental changes. They need constant monitoring and adjustment. But, the original design specifications don't mention that, one of the Nurax said, pulsing with confused yellow colors. Because the human engineers who designed them understood it intuitively, Mincio said. They knew that complex systems need flexibility. They built in adjustment parameters and assumed future operators would use them. But, you never did. You just ran the reactors at default settings. She pulled up a simulation. Watch what happens when I adjust the field strength by 0.3% in Reactor 7 to compensate for the solar wind variation we're experiencing today. The simulation showed the entire network stabilizing, becoming more efficient. 0.3%, the Nurax repeated. That's such a tiny change. Tiny changes make huge differences in complex systems, Mincio said. That's what we're trying to teach you. Don't just follow the manual. Understand the principles. Then, you can make the tiny adjustments that keep everything running smoothly. On the Vrathan homeworld, the transformation was even more profound. Chief Scientist Thrakos stood in her laboratory with Dr. Jae-min, a human research specialist. I still don't understand how you do it, Thrakos admitted. Your research notes are full of random attempts and lucky guesses. That's not science. Science is careful, logical experimentation. Jae-min laughed. Is it? Let me show you something. He pulled up a famous Vrathan discovery from 300 years ago. This breakthrough in fusion technology. Your records say it came from careful, logical progression through a planned research program. Is that true? Thrakos examined the records. Yes. Absolutely. We followed a clear experimental protocol. Now look at these notes from the human scientist who was consulting on the project. Jae-min showed her a different set of records. He suggested trying something that wasn't in the protocol. Something that didn't make logical sense. But, one of your scientists tried it anyway, probably just to prove it wouldn't work. And, it did work. That lucky guess is what led to your breakthrough. Thrakos stared at the records. We never knew that. We credited the discovery to our systematic approach. Because that's how you tell the story afterward, Jae-min said gently. You take the messy, chaotic process of actual discovery and clean it up into a nice logical narrative. But, real innovation is always messy. It's trying things that shouldn't work. It's combining ideas that don't belong together. It's being willing to fail 100 times to succeed once. So when you expelled us for being chaotic and unpredictable, Thrakos began. You expelled us for the very thing that made us valuable, Jae-min finished. Our chaos was feeding your order. Our creativity was enabling your logic. We weren't dangerous. We were necessary. 6 months after the Human Compact was signed, Ambassador Jinho stood in the council chamber once more. This time, he was there for a celebration. The unveiling of a new monument. The monument stood at the chamber's center, where everyone could see it. It was simple. Just a black stone with words carved in every Union language. Never confuse different with inferior. Never mistake kindness for weakness. And, never, ever underestimate those you don't understand. The council leader stood beside it, his scales now bright and healthy again. This monument will stand as long as this chamber exists, he announced. So that we never forget what we almost lost. Not just human help, but the lesson that came with it. After the ceremony, Mayang approached Jinho. Sir, do you think they've really learned? Or will they forget in a generation and become arrogant again? Jinho watched as alien species mingled with human specialists, asking questions, sharing ideas, learning from each other. Maybe they'll forget, he admitted. Pride is a powerful thing. But, we'll be here to remind them. And, more importantly, we're not the desperate newcomers anymore. We're equals. Partners. If they forget that, we'll simply leave again. And, now they know they can't survive without us. He smiled. But, I don't think they will forget. Some lessons are too painful to forget. The council had smirked when humans left, certain that the primitive species would fade into obscurity. They had no idea what was coming. They had no idea that humanity's strength was never in weapons or numbers, but in creativity, adaptability, and the stubborn refusal to give up. Now they knew. And the galaxy was better for it.